It was a cool Saturday afternoon, and the community center buzzed with excitement. Families, neighbors, and children had all gathered for the annual school fundraising event. The large hall smelled of popcorn, cotton candy, and homemade snacks. Children ran around playing games, holding balloons, while parents chatted and laughed in corners. Booths lined the edges of the room, face painting, ring toss, cupcake stands, in a little corner where local crafts were being sold. There was joy in the air, the kind of joy that made people feel like everything was right in the world, even if just for a day. In the middle of the room stood a large, glossy black grand piano. It was polished so well that it reflected the bright lights above like a mirror. The piano wasn't being played. It was just there as part of the decor for the evening's talent showcase. A thin red rope surrounded it, a small sign dangling from one end. Do not touch. Most kids didn't even glance at it. After all, to them, it was just a boring old instrument that didn't light up or shoot water like the carnival games. But for one little girl standing near the edge of the crowd, it was everything. Her name was Emily Harper, just 8 years old. With messy brown hair tied loosely into a ponytail and worn-out sneakers that had clearly been passed down through siblings or maybe bought from a second-hand store. She wasn't the kind of child who drew attention. She never shouted or pushed to the front. She stood quietly, hands folded behind her back, eyes fixed on the piano with a look of pure wonder. There was something about it, the shape, the shine, the way the keys seemed to glow under the overhead lights. It was as if the instrument was calling to her, not in a magical way, just in a way that made her feel something inside she couldn't explain. She walked slowly, carefully, as if afraid the floor itself might break beneath her. No one paid much attention. Kids rushed past her, parents were busy talking. Emily moved closer to the piano, just enough to be on the edge of the red rope. Her small hand reached out. She didn't mean to touch it, not really. But her fingers itched. She wanted to feel it. Just one key. She reached out and pressed a single note. It was soft. The sound rang through the air like a whisper, beautiful whisper. Asterisk, and then came the laughter. A group of older boys had seen her. They stood nearby, holding sodas and half-eaten slices of pizza. One of them pointed and shouted, "Hey, what do you think you're doing? That's not a toy, dummy." Another one laughed even louder. She probably thinks she can play piano. That's rich. One boy imitated her, holding out his hands and pretending to press invisible keys, making random honking sounds with his mouth. Their laughter grew louder. A few nearby kids turned to look. Some joined in the giggles. Emily froze. Her hand pulled back quickly as if the piano had burned her. Her cheeks turned red. Her heart raced. She looked down at the floor. An adult. Nearby, a lady in a green sweater with a clipboard frowned and walked over. "Sweetheart, that piano's not for playing. Please step away, okay?" Her voice wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was the kind of voice adults use when they think they're being patient with a child who should know better. Emily nodded silently and stepped back. The boys kept laughing, but they moved on to tease someone else. The moment had passed for them, but for Emily, it stayed. She walked to the far corner of the hall and sat alone behind a stack of folding chairs. She pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. She didn't cry, not really, but her eyes stung. Her chest hurt. In a way she didn't have words for. She hadn't tried to show off. She hadn't tried to impress anyone. She just wanted to hear what it sounded like. That one note had made her heart feel something. Full, alive. But they had laughed. They always laughed. Back at school, Emily was never picked for games. It wasn't funny or loud. She was just there. Teachers liked her because she was quiet and never caused trouble, but none of them really noticed her either. She had one faded backpack with pins on it, a lunchbox that sometimes carried nothing more than peanut butter crackers, and shoes that squeaked when she walked. The other girls had glitter in their hair. Emily had lint, but what nobody knew, not her classmates, not her teachers. Not even her principal was that Emily could play the piano. Not perfectly, not like someone who had lessons or expensive tutors, but she could play. She had a tiny toy keyboard at home, something her mother had picked up from a secondhand shop for a few dollars on her 8th birthday. It had missing buttons and a speaker that buzzed when the volume went too high, but Emily loved it. At night when her homework was done and her mother was at her evening cleaning shift, Emily sat cross-legged in their small living room, tapping out melodies she remembered from the radio or made up in her head. She had taught herself using free YouTube videos when the library Wi-Fi worked. She didn't understand the words like chord progression or arpeggio, but she could copy what she heard. Her fingers weren't trained, but they were fast. And her ears? Her ears were something special. She could hear a song once and find its heart. Music made her feel things she didn't feel anywhere else. Brave, safe, like she mattered. Back at the community center, the evening continued. Kids performed skits on the stage. A group of fifth-grade girls sang a pop song. Off-key, and a young boy told knock-knock jokes into a mic. The crowd clapped politely, laughed, cheered. Emily watched from the back row beside her mother, Rachel. Rachel had worked overtime that morning just so she could bring Emily to the event. Noticed her daughter was unusually quiet. "You okay, baby?" she asked softly. Emily nodded. Yeah, Rachel knew that voice. It meant no. But she also knew Emily wouldn't say more until she was ready, so she just put her arm around her and pulled her close. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Emily replied, her voice small. On the way home that evening, they walked instead of taking the bus. It was a clear night. The sky was deep purple and dotted with stars. Emily kicked a stone. As they walked, "Why do people laugh at others when they don't even know them?" she asked suddenly. Rachel blinked. That question came from deep pain. "Because sometimes people are scared of things they don't understand," she answered. Gently, and sometimes they just want to feel better than someone else. Emily didn't respond. Rachel stopped walking. She turned to face her daughter. "What happened today?" Emily looked up. "I touched the piano. Just one key. I didn't mean to play. I just wanted to feel it." Rachel knelt down. "Did someone say something?" Emily nodded. They laughed. At me, said I was stupid, that I'd break it. Rachel's eyes welled up, but she blinked the tears away before Emily could see. She held her daughter's face. "You are not stupid. What? And you did nothing wrong. You're allowed to touch beautiful things. You're a beautiful thing." Emily finally let one tear fall. Rachel wiped it away. "They didn't hear you today," Rachel said, her voice soft but steady. "But one day they will." Emily didn't answer, but something about her mother's words stuck in her heart like a tiny seed. When they got home, Rachel made warm soup from leftovers. Emily sat on the worn-out couch and stared at her little keyboard in the corner. She didn't want to play, not tonight, not after the laughter, but later. When the house was quiet and the soup bowls had been washed, Emily sat in front of the keyboard. She placed her fingers gently on the tiny plastic keys. Then she played that same note she had touched at the community. Center, just one. And slowly, she added another. Then another. Soon, she was playing a melody she didn't even know she knew. A tune made from sadness, from hope, from something deep inside. She played for herself, for the quiet, for the girl who had been laughed at. The room filled with soft music. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And outside, under the night sky, the stars seemed to shine just a little brighter. The sun rose quietly over the small town where Emily lived, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. It was a school day. The alarm clock in their tiny apartment buzzed at exactly 6:30 a.m., a sound too loud for such a small space. Emily opened her eyes slowly. The same chipped ceiling greeted her. The same worn-out posters on the wall, faded images of ballerinas. Gah! A cat playing violin, and a small chart of piano keys taped beside her bed. Her bed creaked as she got up, careful not to make too much noise. Her mom had worked late again, and was still asleep on the pull-out couch. Emily tiptoed into the kitchen, which was really just a narrow corner of the living room. She poured cereal into a bowl, but there wasn't any milk left. She didn't complain. Dry cereal was still breakfast. She sat quietly at the table, chewing slowly, her eyes drifting to the little keyboard tucked into the corner under the window. She hadn't touched it since the community center event, even though her mom had told her she did nothing wrong. The laughter was hard to forget. It had dug into her skin like little thorns. Every time she thought about that beautiful piano, she remembered the way those boys had pointed and laughed, the way the grown-ups looked at her like she didn't belong. And worst of all, the fear that maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong near something so grand, so magical. Maybe her hands weren't good enough. But deep down, another voice, quieter, softer, whispered that they were wrong. That music had always lived inside her. That voice was getting harder to hear lately, but it was still there. The school bus honked outside. Emily grabbed her backpack, kissed her mom on the forehead, and rushed out the door. School, for Emily, was not easy. Not because she couldn't understand things, in fact. She was smart. She understood math quickly, could read entire books in a day, and always did her homework. But it was the spaces between classes that felt like walking on glass. The lunchroom, recess, group projects. Those were the places where words hurt more than sticks or stones. At lunch, she sat at the end of the table with her sandwich and apple slices. The girls in her class talked about their piano teachers, their dance classes, their new iPads. One girl, Ashley, bragged about performing at a local recital last weekend. "My teacher said I played like a professional," she said proudly, tossing her blonde ponytail over her shoulder. "She told my mom I might be good enough for the national competition." Emily listened in silence, chewing slowly. Her fingers twitched under the table. "Do you play anything, Emily?" another girl asked suddenly, not kindly, but with the kind of voice that dared her to say yes so they could laugh. Emily looked up. For a moment she considered saying, "I do, actually. I've been learning by myself. I can play by ear." Instead, she just shook her head. "No," she said quietly. The girls turned away. Already bored, Emily felt her cheeks flush again. Every day was like this, invisible, until someone decided to notice her, but not in a good way. After school, Emily went straight to the library. It was her safe place. Between tall bookshelves and whispering voices, she found peace. She walked past the storytime room, past the comic book section, to the very back corner where the music books lived. There were old VHS tapes no one watched. Any more worn-out books about composers, a few computers where people could plug in headphones and practice music theory. And then there was her favorite part, the dusty digital piano tucked beside the wall. It was old, with scratches and fading keys, but it worked. And more importantly, no one ever used it. No one but her. She sat down, plugged in the headphones, and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment she just sat there, her eyes closed. Then slowly, she began to play a soft tune, one she had made up in her head the night before. The notes were gentle, flowing like a stream. There were no lyrics, no title, just feeling. Just her heart poured out in sound. Unbeknownst to her, someone was listening. A few feet away, a man stood watching from behind the bookshelves. He was tall, with gray hair, a wrinkled face, and kind eyes. His name was Mr. Dawson, a retired pianist, who now volunteered at the library. Most days, he shelved books and helped elderly patrons find large print novels. But today, something stopped him in his tracks. He had heard someone playing, not just pressing keys, but playing with emotion, depth, and natural timing. It's a kind of playing that couldn't be taught. He peeked around the corner and saw a small girl, her back straight, her hands dancing across the keys like they were born to be there. When she finished, she didn't look around. She simply removed the headphones and placed them gently back. On the hook, Mr. Dawson approached carefully. He didn't want to startle her. "That was beautiful," he said softly. Emily turned, startled. Her eyes widened with alarm and she stepped back from the piano. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to. I thought no one was using it." "You didn't do anything wrong," he interrupted with a gentle smile. "In fact, I'm glad I heard you." Emily tilted her head, unsure what to say. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily? Emily Harper?" "Well, Emily Harper," he said, kneeling slightly so they were eye level. "How long have you been playing?" She looked down at her shoes. I don't really play. I have a toy keyboard at home. I just copy what I hear. It's called playing by ear, he said, and it's a rare gift. Emily blinked. No one had ever called it a gift before, especially not a grown-up. I'm Mr. Dawson. I used to teach music for a long time. You have something special. Would you like me to help you learn more? Emily stared at him, unsure if she heard him right. Help me, like lessons. He nodded. Once a week, right here at the library, free of charge. Emily's heart jumped. But why? He smiled. Because when someone has a gift, it deserves to grow. And sometimes, life gives us people to help water the seed. She didn't say anything at first. She looked at the piano, then at him. Then she nodded. Slowly but surely. Okay, she whispered. That night, Emily couldn't stop smiling. Rachel noticed it the moment she walked in from work. You're glowing, she said, pulling off her shoes. Did something good happen today? Emily nodded excitedly and told her everything about the piano, the man who had listened. The offer for lessons. Rachel sat down, stunned. Free lessons? Emily nodded again, said, I have a gift. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. He reached out and pulled Emily into her arms. You do, she whispered. No. You really do. And just like that, the seed planted in Emily's heart began to grow. The next week, she returned to the library after school. Mr. Dawson was waiting. He brought a binder filled with printed music, a metronome, and a small notebook where he wrote down her progress, but instead of starting with notes and scales, he asked her a simple question. What does music feel like to you? Emily thought for a moment. Like a story, she said, without words. It's like the part in a movie when nobody talks, but you know exactly what's happening. He smiled. Exactly. And that's how they started. It's not with rules, but with feeling. He taught her how to read notes, how to hold her fingers properly, how to practice discipline, but always reminded her that music wasn't about showing off. It was about speaking when your mouth couldn't. It was about truth. Each week, Emily grew better. Her confidence grew too, though she still kept her lessons a secret. School was still hard. The girls still whispered. The boys still laughed at. Different things. But now she had something they didn't. A secret world. A place where she was more than just the quiet girl in the back row. A place where her voice rang clear. Months passed. She played Bach, Beethoven. She even composed her own little pieces, which Mr. Dawson called song stories. Rachel often sat beside her in the evening, listening with quiet awe. One evening, as she finished a haunting melody she had created herself, Rachel clapped softly and said, You could perform that, you know. At a show, people would love it. Emily shook her head quickly. No, no one wants to see me play. They laughed once, Rachel said gently, but maybe next time they'll listen. Emily said nothing, but deep inside, the thought stuck that maybe one day she would let them hear her. Maybe. The cold months rolled in quietly, one fallen leaf at a time. The mornings grew darker, and the wind turned sharp. Scarves and mittens became part of daily life. But inside the library, where it was always warm and quiet, something else was changing. Something invisible, powerful. Emily Harper had never missed a lesson. Every Tuesday afternoon, she'd slip away from the noise of school and walk to the library with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Inside that small building, among shelves of forgotten books and fading magazines, she found something rare, not just peace, not just kindness, but purpose. She was no longer the girl who sat in the back row of class, or the one who people ignored at lunch, at least not here. Here she was someone else entirely. Each week Mr. Dawson would be waiting for her, always with a smile and a gentle nod. He never rushed her, never pressured. He spoke with respect, as if she were already a pianist and not just a little girl learning where middle C was. And in a way she was already a pianist, not by degree or fame, but by heart. The piano in the corner of the library, the same dusty digital one with chipped corners and worn keys, had become their shared world. Some days they practiced classical pieces. Other days he encouraged her to improvise. She didn't always understand the names of the chords or the theories he mentioned, but she understood feeling. When she played, she poured everything. She had into the notes the laughter that still haunted her, the quiet loneliness at school, the joy of creating something beautiful out of nothing at all. "You don't just play notes," Mr. Dawson said one day after she finished a piece. "By Chopin, you tell the truth. Most adults can't even do that." Emily looked at him, unsure if he was joking. He wasn't. "You remind me of someone," he said softly. "Someone I taught many years ago. She was about your age when I first met her. Could barely read music, but she had that thing, the soul, like you." "It's what happened to her?" Emily asked. "She grew up, played all over the world, even played at Carnegie Hall once." Emily's eyes widened. "Wow." He smiled. "But the most important performance she ever gave, she told me, was at her high school cafeteria. Just one song. One old, upright piano. But that was the day people finally saw her, heard her. And they never forgot it." Emily thought about that story the whole way home, that night. She sat on the couch beside her mom as they shared a simple dinner of rice and beans. Rachel was exhausted, as usual. Her eyes had shadows beneath them, and her hands were rough from cleaning work. But when she looked at Emily, her entire face softened. "How was your lesson today?" she asked. Emily smiled. "I learned about pedal control and dynamics." "Pedal control, huh?" Rachel laughed gently. "That sounds serious." "Like, the way you press it changes how the music feels. Makes it softer or more emotional." "Like how seasoning changes food," Rachel replied, tapping her fork against her plate. Emily nodded. "Exactly." There was a pause. "You've really gotten good," Rachel said quietly. "Oh, that right?" Emily shrugged. "Compliment." Still felt strange. She never knew how to accept them. Rachel leaned forward. "You're not just good, you're special. I don't care what anyone at that fundraiser thought. You're not just playing, you're speaking. With your heart." Emily looked down. "Mr. Dawson said something like that too." "Well, Mr. Dawson sounds like a smart man." They smiled at each other. Soft, silent moment passed between them. One made of pride, love, and understanding. The next day at school, things felt a little different. Not because the other kids treated her better. They didn't. Not because the lunchroom got quieter. It was still as loud and cliquish as ever. But because something inside Emily was shifting. The music was changing her. In math class, while solving equations, she started hearing rhythms in her head, not distracting, but comforting. In English class, she imagined what certain poems would sound like as music. Even the harsh bells between periods began to sound, more like notes than noise. She was no longer just living day to day. She was feeling every day. Still, she kept her lessons a secret. Not because she was ashamed she wasn't, but because she wanted it to be hers. Just hers. In a world where so much was loud and showy and fake, she needed one thing that stayed pure. She wasn't ready to share it. Not yet, but life, as it often does, had other plans. It happened on a Wednesday morning during announcements. The school principal's voice came crackling through the loudspeaker. "Attention students, the Spring Talent Showcase will be held. 6 weeks from today, students interested in performing music, dance, poetry, comedy can sign up at the front office. All grades welcome. Tryouts will be next month." Emily didn't react. She didn't even look up from her notebook. But around her, the room buzzed with chatter. "I'm totally doing my TikTok dance," said one girl near her. "I might do a magic trick," a boy announced proudly. Someone laughed and shouted, "Maybe Emily can perform being invisible." Laughter followed. Emily didn't flinch. She was used to it by now, but at the library that afternoon, Mr. Dawson brought it up. "Did you hear about the talent showcase at your school?" She nodded, her fingers still on the keys, practicing a gentle lullaby. "Peace. You should sign up." Emily immediately shook her head. "No way. Why not?" She paused. "Because they'll laugh. Again." "They laughed before," Mr. Dawson said softly. "But that was before they heard you. They don't want to hear me, Emily." Muttered, "They just want to laugh." Mr. Dawson didn't argue. He just let her play. The next week, when Emily walked into the library, she noticed something strange, her name written on a small index card pinned to the community bulletin board. Emily Harper. Talent Showcase Application, Piano. She stared at it in shock. Mr. Dawson approached behind her, holding his cup of tea. "You're in. You signed me up." "Oh, I did." Emily turned to him, heart pounding. "Why would you do that?" "'Cause," he said calmly, "you won't do it for yourself. Not yet. But you need to do this." She crossed her arms. "I'm not going," he nodded. "Okay, but if you change your mind, the audition's in 2 weeks." Emily didn't speak for the rest of the lesson. At home, she didn't tell her mom. She couldn't. What if she failed? What if they really laughed this time? What if she forgot everything she learned? But in the quiet of her room, she practiced harder than ever. Secretly, carefully, until her fingers hurt, till her eyes were heavy with sleep. Every night, she told herself, "I won't go." But every morning, that tiny voice inside whispered, "Maybe you will." 2 weeks later, she stood in front of her school's music room door, trembling. She had the audition pass in her hand. It felt heavier than a brick. Inside, students were lining up, waiting their turn. A few were doing vocal warm-ups. One kid was practicing a dance move against the wall. Another boy dropped his prop cards and scrambled to collect them. Emily could hear her heart beating in her ears. She turned to leave, but then she heard someone call out, "Emily." She turned. It was Mrs. Cole, the school's music teacher. She was holding a clipboard. "Are you auditioning today?" she asked kindly. Emily swallowed. I don't know." Mrs. Cole smiled gently. "We'd love to have you." "What instrument?" "Piano," Emily whispered. "Wonderful. There's a keyboard set up in the music room. You'll be amazing." Emily didn't know why she walked in. Her legs moved on their own. She sat at the keyboard, her hands shaking. Her name was called. She nodded. Then silence. Then she began to play. Not loud, not dramatic. Soft. Honest. A melody she had written herself. Something that didn't exist anywhere else but in her heart. As she played, her fear began to fall away, note by note. The room melted. The noise faded. There was only the music, the story, her truth. When she finished, she opened her eyes slowly. The room was still. Then quiet clapping. Just a few people. But it was enough. She stood, walked out, and didn't look back. That night, at dinner, she told her mom everything. Rachel didn't cry, but her smile was the biggest Emily had ever seen. "You did it," she said. "No," Emily replied. "I just played." Rachel reached across the table and took her hand. "That is doing it." The days after the audition moved slowly, not because time was truly dragging, but because Emily was living in a strange state of uncertainty. She didn't know whether she had made it into the showcase or not. No one had said anything yet. No teachers mentioned her name. None of the other students gave her any strange looks. It was like her performance had simply disappeared into thin air, and part of her was relieved. She had done it. She had played in front of people, even if it was just a small audition room. Even if she had been too nervous to look up, she had done it. That was more than she had ever imagined just a month ago. And for her, that felt like a quiet victory. But there was another part of her, the part that dreamed while she slept, practiced in secret, that wanted more. That part of her hope someone had listened, that maybe one person had felt what she felt when she played, that maybe her name would show up on the list taped to the school bulletin board when the final performers were announced, when the list was posted on Monday morning. It happened during the chaos between first period and lunch. A crowd of students gathered around the board just outside the main office. Emily stood far behind them, clutching her backpack straps, trying not to look like she cared, but she did care. Her heart was pounding so loudly that it drowned out the noise around her. She stepped closer. The kids at the front were shouting names, laughing, cheering, pushing one another to see better. "I made it," someone yelled. "I knew I'd get picked," said another. Then someone said, "Who's Emily Harper?" Emily froze. A few kids turned. One boy shrugged. "No idea. Must be one of the second graders or something." "She's that weird girl in Mrs. Peterson's class," a girl replied, rolling her eyes. "She never talks. Wait, she's performing." What's she doing? Disappearing on stage? More laughter? Emily didn't wait to hear the rest. She walked away fast. Her cheeks were burning. Her hands were cold. She couldn't decide if she was excited, scared, or sick. Maybe all three. That afternoon at the library, she sat down at the piano without speaking. Mr. Dawson noticed, right away. "You made it, didn't you?" he asked, setting his tea down beside his chair. Emily nodded. "Barely." Mr. Dawson smiled. "And what's wrong?" She kept her eyes on the keys. "They were laughing at my name. They don't even know me." "That's true," he said gently, "but they will." She didn't answer. He reached over and placed a hand on hers. "You don't play for applause, Emily. You play because your soul has something to say. That's all." She took a deep breath. "I'm scared." "I know." "What if they laugh when I'm on stage?" "They might," he admitted. "God, it won't be for long." She looked up at him. "Because once they hear you play," he continued, "they won't be able to laugh anymore." That night, Emily told her mom the news. Rachel's face lit up with pride, but then softened when she saw the hesitation in Emily's eyes. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to," she said. "I'll support you either way." Emily sat down beside her on the couch. "I want to. I think I'm just scared I'll mess up." Rachel tucked a piece of hair behind Emily's ear. "Sweetheart, even if you play one wrong note, you'll still be braver than most kids ever will be. You're already winning, just by trying." Emily nodded, but her stomach still felt tight. She went to bed that night with her mind racing. Her fingers twitched under the covers, playing invisible keys. The melody she planned to perform, the original piece she had written herself, kept echoing in her head like a ghost. The next few weeks were filled with preparation. Mr. Dawson helped her fine-tune the dynamics. He worked with her on posture, pacing, and breathing. "Even your silence on stage will say something," he told her. "The way you walk, the way you sit, the way you wait before your first note, it all speaks." Emily practiced every day after school, even on weekends, even when she was tired. It became her mission, her shield, her way forward. At school, she tried to remain invisible. She kept her head down, avoided the other performers, and said little. Most of the other students still didn't know she was playing. Her name on the list didn't mean much to them. To them, she was still just Emily, the quiet girl in the back, the nobody. But she was okay with that, because inside something else was growing. Not confidence exactly, but something like it. A quiet flame. 2 days before the show, there was a rehearsal. Emily stood in the wings of the school auditorium with the other participants, watching one act after another take. The stage. There were dancers, singers, a boy who juggled, and even a comedy duo from 5th grade who told cheesy jokes into the mic. She waited her turn in silence, gripping her sheet music in her small hands. Her palms were sweaty. Her knees felt like jelly. Her breath came in tiny, sharp puffs. When her name was called, she stepped forward slowly, each foot heavier than the last. The auditorium was empty, except for a few teachers and the sound technician. But it felt like a million people were watching. She sat down at the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She took a deep breath and froze. Everything in her mind went blank. Her song, her precious melody that she had played 1,000 times vanished. She blinked, heart racing. From the back of the auditorium, a familiar voice called out, "Emily." It was Mr. Dawson. She turned. He nodded. Just once. Calm, steady, certain. She turned back to the piano, closed her eyes, listened, and then her fingers moved. The melody returned, soft at first, then stronger. Her body swayed gently as she played, like a boat riding a wave. The room disappeared. The nerves faded. She was alone with the music, her story, her truth. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then the music teacher clapped. The sound technician clapped. Even the janitor clapped. Emily stood slowly. Walked off the stage. Mr. Dawson met her in the wings. "You lost your breath," he said, smiling. "But you found your voice." The night before the talent show, it rained. Hard. The windows in their apartment rattled from the wind. But inside, everything was warm. Emily sat at the table, polishing her shoes. Rachel was ironing her dress, a simple blue one they had. "Found at a thrift shop 2 weeks ago? You nervous?" Rachel asked. Emily nodded. "A little. That's okay. That means you care." They ate dinner quietly. Then Rachel handed Emily a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" Emily asked. "A letter," Rachel replied. "Can open it tomorrow, before you go on stage." Emily placed it beside her sheet music and smiled. "Thanks, Mom." That night, she slept with her hands beneath her pillow, as if protecting the music that lived inside them. And somewhere in the sky, the storm cleared. The morning of the show arrived, bright and clear. The school auditorium was decorated with string lights, colorful banners, and rows of neatly arranged chairs. Parents, teachers, and students began filling the seats as the sun dipped lower in the sky. The air buzzed with excitement and chatter. Backstage, Emily sat quietly in a folding chair, dressed in her blue thrift store dress and polished shoes. Her hair was neatly brushed, her hands folded in her lap. Around her, other performers adjusted costumes, tested props, and whispered nervously. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't need to. She had her music. She reached into her bag and pulled out the letter Rachel had given her. Carefully, she unfolded it and read, "Dear Emily, I don't know how many people will be in that audience tonight. I don't know if they'll listen the way you deserve to be heard. But I do know this. You are brave. You are powerful. Are my heart. When you sit at that piano, remember you are not alone. I'll be there. Mr. Dawson will be there. And so will every single part of you that has ever felt small or scared or invisible. Tonight, you don't just play music. Tonight, you let the world see you. I love you always, Mom." Emily read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it back in her bag. Her name was called. It was time she stood, walked toward the stage, and took a deep breath. The spotlight hit her before she reached the piano. It was warmer than she expected. Brighter, too, like walking into a silent sun. The auditorium wasn't enormous, but to Emily, it felt like stepping into a coliseum. Rows upon rows of people sat beneath the dim glow of hanging lights. There were parents with cameras in hand, teachers lined up near the walls, younger students bouncing in their seats, and behind them all, the quiet hum of anticipation, and at the very front, in the third row from the stage, her mother, Rachel, sat perfectly still, both hands clutched around the letter Emily had read just minutes earlier. Her eyes were wide, moist, and she smiled. Not a big flashy smile, but the kind of quiet smile that said, "I'm here." Next to her sat Mr. Dawson, dressed in an old tweed coat and a red scarf that looked far too warm for the season. He didn't wave. He didn't even move. He just watched her with calm, wise eyes. Eyes that believed in her when no one else did. Emily's. Fingers felt cold. She reached the piano bench and sat down slowly, careful not to make a sound. Her feet dangled slightly above the floor. She was still small for her age. Few students in the crowd giggled, probably thinking the same thing. She looks like a kindergartner, she heard whispers, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes. She's that shy girl from Mrs. Peterson's class. Didn't she get laughed at during tryouts? Why is she even performing? She looks like she's going to faint. But Emily didn't flinch. She stared at the piano. She didn't look up. Instead, she placed her small, pale hands gently on the keys, the way Mr. Dawson had taught her, and closed her eyes. In that moment, the whispers faded. The laughter died. The lights, the crowd, the nerves, all of it slipped away like the last note of a song drifting into silence. She could hear her heartbeat. She could hear the quiet of the room, holding its breath, and then, as she began to play, it started softly, almost like a whisper. A gentle melody flowed from her fingertips, delicate and clear. It was a song she had written herself, though it sounded as if it had existed forever. Notes rose and fell like waves, pulling the audience in without them even realizing. People leaned forward in their seats. Some tilted their heads, confused, as if they couldn't believe that sound, that beauty was coming from her. Emily didn't see it. She was lost in the music. Her body moved slightly with each phrase, her eyes still shut, her fingers telling the story her voice never could. It was a story about loneliness, about being overlooked, about sitting in silence while others laughed, but it was also about hope. The melody swelled. It became stronger, brighter, like sunlight breaking through clouds. A part of the song climbed higher and higher, bursting through tension with courage, with grace, with fire, and the audience felt it. Something shifted. The students who had mocked her began to fidget. Uncomfortable now because they knew they had been wrong. This wasn't just a little girl playing. It's piano. This was someone speaking without words, someone seen, and she was magnificent. Halfway through the performance, the auditorium was so still you could hear the click of a camera shutter. Even the teachers, who had seen dozens of these shows, sat mesmerized. A few parents wiped tears from their eyes. They didn't even know who she was, but they felt her. Rachel sat frozen, a hand over her mouth. Her daughter, her sweet, quiet Emily, was transforming in front of everyone.
Oh.
She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't small. She was radiant. Mr. Dawson blinked back tears, though he'd promised himself he wouldn't cry. Not tonight. He had believed in her from the first note, from the first day. But even he hadn't expected this. He leaned over and whispered to Rachel, "They'll never forget this. Not one of them." Near the back of the auditorium, even Principal Walters had paused in the doorway, his eyebrows lifted in awe. Had no idea who she was either, but he knew talent when he heard it. And then the music slowed. Emily's fingers softened. The melody returned to a gentle calm, the same way it had begun, like a secret, like a dream, and with a final, delicate chord, the song ended. Emily's hands hovered for just a second longer. Then she opened her eyes. Silence for a moment. The world didn't move. And then applause. Thunderous, unstoppable applause. The auditorium exploded with clapping, shouting, and even whistles. Teachers stood. Parents stood. Students who had never even looked at her before were now on their feet, cheering. Emily blinked in disbelief. She looked out at the sea of faces. They were smiling at her. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't whispering. They were cheering. Rachel stood too, tears rolling down her cheeks, clapping so hard it hurt. Mr. Dawson simply smiled, proud and quiet. Her knees were trembling, not from fear but from joy. She gave a small bow, and then she smiled. It was the first real smile she had shown in weeks, months maybe. The MCA, a nervous sixth grader named Jordan, ran back on stage holding the mic. "Wow," he said breathlessly. I think we can all agree that was amazing. Emily Harper, everyone." The crowd erupted again. Emily turned and walked backstage, the sound of applause echoing behind her like a heartbeat. As soon as she passed the curtains, a group of students ran toward her. "Where did you learn to play like that? That song? Was that yours? Are you going to be in next year's talent show too?" Emily blushed, unsure how to answer. Even the performers who had laughed at her weeks before were now looking at her differently, not with pity or mockery, but with respect, even envy. Backstage was a blur of compliments and congratulations. Emily found a quiet spot near the wall, trying to catch her breath. That's when Mr. Dawson appeared. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her with that same warm smile. "Well," he finally said, "how do you feel?" Emily looked at him, eyes shining. I think I feel tall." He chuckled. "You sounded tall." She giggled softly, her nerves finally starting to melt away. Rachel joined them moments later, wrapping Emily in a hug so tight it nearly knocked the breath from her lungs. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "So proud." Emily leaned into the hug. "Thanks, Mom." The rest of the evening flew by in a happy blur. The other performances came and went, but people were still talking about her. In the crowd, she heard whispers. She was amazing. Best performance of the night. Where did she come from? By the time the talent show ended, everyone knew Emily Harper's, named not because of gossip, not because of rumors, but because she had earned it. She had walked on that stage, terrified, and walked off transformed that night. Back home, Emily placed her sheet music on the small bookshelf beside her bed. She didn't need to look at it. She knew it by heart now. Rachel tucked her in with a kiss on the forehead. "Sleep well, sweet girl. You were magic." Emily turned toward the window, staring up at the stars. Her heart was full, not because of the applause or the compliments, but because she had done something she never thought she could. She had spoken, not with words, not with noise, but with music. She had shared her soul, and the world had listened. In the days that followed, something quietly changed in Emily's world. At school, and the halls that once felt cold and distant now greeted her with warmth. Students smiled. A few whispered, "You're the girl who played the piano, right?" with wonder in their voices. She didn't need to say much. A small nod, a quiet smile. That was enough. Her music had already spoken for her. Mr. Dawson brought in a new piece for them to learn together, but Emily politely declined. "Can I write something instead?" she asked. He beamed. "You're ready?" At home, the old piano wasn't just an escape anymore. It became her space not to hide, but to shine. Sometimes her mother sat nearby with tea in hand, simply listening as melodies filled the small apartment like sunlight. Emily never bragged. She never sought attention. But she no longer hid. And though she remained quiet, people finally heard her. Because once someone finds their voice, whether through words, music, or courage, they never truly go unheard again.